and what's cool about it is the creepiness is as much due to the composition as to the acting or the makeup or any of that, and the light and dark. His head is like in the corner of the frame. It's like it's not like you would miss it, but
he's lurking. You know, I mean, and that's what evil does. It lurks.
You
in
like
the
just
shadows.
see his head and like maybe his hands in the dark. And it's just this amazing composition.
Because fundamentally, this is a story about the things that go bump in the night.
Right.
You know, it's about nightmares. Like they have dreams and they're troubled by their dreams and they're not sure what's real. And
that's why he doesn't chase people. That's why he doesn't run fast. He doesn't overpower you physically, really.
Yeah.
In both films, he almost hypnotizes you. He moves slower and he paralyzes his victim all the more the slower he moves. Almost. You know. It's so intense. The scene where I guess it's technically the second time he sucks Jonathan's blood, but it's the first time we actually see him. In the first time, he falls asleep in the chair and then wakes up with bite marks on his neck. Second time, he's in bed, and this is when Lucy is having the vision of this, where she is in Germany. And you see him approaching, and it's intensified in Herzog's version. But he just comes through the doorway, and he's just moving so slowly.
It looks like he's gliding.
And he almost, I think it's ambiguous to what degree he has like seductive power, because in the scene in Herzog's, as much eroticism as there is in the kind of climactic blood-sucking scene, because she's trying to get him to stay there so that he'll get caught by the sun in the morning. It's ambiguous to what degree like he actually has power over her psychologically.
Well, but I think that
he definitely wants to.
But I think that it actually is pointing to something that's true about evil, in that like sometimes we just freeze when we're confronted with something that's really diabolical.
Right.
I think that this is not uncommon in cases of abuse, where someone comes into your room at night, and what are you going to do? Some people, their fight or flight mode kicks in,
right?
But sometimes it's just being frozen. We're not equipped to confront the evil,
Wow.
And
that's a great point.
And I think that it happens, in perhaps more subtle ways in our day-to-day as well. I mean, heck, I think about, a lot of times when I'm on the New York City subway, sometimes you just get tense and freeze up and please don't look at me, I don't know what I'll do if you do look at me. I think that this also sort of dovetails with what we're talking about with like the pandemic, and a tendency to try to reduce evil to sort of like a materialistic or a rationalistic reduction of these things. It's just being ill prepared for when evil really does rear its face. It creeps there in the shadows. It's there in the dark. The way that light and dark is used in both of these films, perhaps more prominently in Nosferatu, in Murnau's Nosferatu, where there's things that we're blind to, but how will we respond when they appear? The sort of perennial allure of this tale is located there. That Nosferatu, he's like from the old world. I mean, this film takes place in Germany. But like even there, it's like you got to go to Transylvania. It's like way out there. It's up this mountain.
Old world in the sense of like medieval, pre-modern, not geographical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for us, as Americans,
it's Eastern Europe, so it's less modern. Than Germany.
So that's what I'm getting at, is that there's like something primeval. There's something that's like. That modern man has forgotten, and that is going to come up to bite him. And I think that it's interesting that the film both films couple this with a plague.
Well, that's what I was going to mention, is because you mentioned earlier horror as being something that is connected to, it's like things that we wouldn't normally experience. That's why it's kind of interesting, and I my first reaction was not to like it, but in both films, yes, it's connected to a plague, with all these rats that Dracula brings with him when he comes to town. He comes to Germany. And I don't remember if that was in the book at all, to be honest. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because it's this naturalistic thing, but it's clearly not like reducing Dracula to being a bringer of plague.
Right.
It's much more like these are the evils that come in his wake.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, and like I think that whatever you may or may not think about the coronavirus and whether it can even hold a candle to any plague of
Thanks
the past.
for humoring me.
No, I look, man, I'm over it, But I think that it's worth mentioning that, like, here we are in our own kind of pandemic, even if it is a bit of a milquetoast pandemic, and I think we're faced with these same questions, right? So, can we reduce this to just strictly something that's happening on the biological order,
Right.
on the microscopic order,
Yeah.
or is there something more fundamental, more old world, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things with these films, especially the original film, because they remove so much of the, in my opinion, they remove so much of the, maybe even the agency, but certainly the spiritual elements of the struggles of the good guys. Mm-hmm. I wonder, like, is there much to draw? How much is there to draw thematically from? Herzog tries to put some like existentialist like nonsense in there. I feel like he sprinkles a little bit of nonsense into every one of his films, but it's almost more noticeable with the fictional films because you expect to hear his point of view in a documentary.
Yeah.
Taking a close look at what's around us, there is some sort of a harmony. It is the harmony of overwhelming and collective murder.
For me, like stuff about plagues and like the old world and like the unknown, this stuff that like isn't so like directly connected to the human heart always strikes me as like a little more thin thematically than the stuff that's like fully integrated into the moral struggle of man and totally. Like love and all this stuff that is so central to the book.
Yeah, right. So
like how much does 1922's film operate on more than just like a creepy movie?
Yeah.
It's like a high level creepy movie.
I don't think it does a lot more than that. But I think that if you're able to watch that film with the kind of like childlike wonder that we've talked about when talking about silent films, this is the second silent film that we've watched on this podcast.
Right.
And there is like a certain childlikeness that I think the silent film invites because we're not being like titillated by so much of the spectacle that we're used to. We're seeing film in its early days, but then there's like almost like an extra delight that comes from seeing the kinds of spectacle that they are able to pull off. So like this iconic scene of Nosferatu rising from the coffin, right? They're just like like
right.
With no strings attached, like humans can't do that. They need to like climb out of coffins, but this guy just did it.
I could probably do it.
It's 1922, and I've never seen anything. When I
get out
like
of the
that.
bathtub, I like try to just.
Well, I think that like up until this point, we've seen the human race has seen horrific imagery in etchings or paintings or stories or perhaps on the stage, but like to see a moving picture of this like demonic looking entity,
rat looking,
there's like some really scary.
I was just thinking of Stephen King. I don't know to what degree these films can be compared to the film of The Shining, but Stephen King's novels are much closer in their like emotional and human and moral core to the novel of Dracula. Because so much of the horror and so much of the pathos and terror of the films has to do with the human situations. And Stephen King's novels, from what I can remember, there's never just human beings encountering. Look, in Nosferatu by Murnau, you get human beings, la-di-da-di-da, oh, horrible creatures, you know? In Stephen King's, you get like flawed, struggling human beings, and so much of the grief. There's as much grief and sorrow as there is terror and horror in his films, because they're also dealing with their own pre-existing human problems. And I feel like, you know, the moral struggle is as much, and the purity of heart elements are as much central as the supernatural or the abnormal horror elements.
Sure.
So that, I guess that's what appeals to me more.
Yeah.
I like to be appealed to at the level of the heart.
Yeah.
You know?